Hi, my name is Patrick Reagan. Welcome to the Storage Devices, Part 8, Troubleshooting Drives, where we discuss disk failures, boot failures, flow performance, disk defragmentation, corrupt drives, S.M.A.R.T, and RAID issues. If you like my videos, don't forget to click the like button. And if you have not already, subscribe to the Pat Has Your Back channel. As with most of my training videos, there are practice questions toward the end of the video. Drives are created to hold programs and data. The one thing that you should understand that the drive will eventually fail. You should expect a hard drive can last between 3 and 5 years, and a solid-state drive can last 5 to 7 years. Unforeseen problems or disasters can shorten the life of a drive, or loss of data such as malware, power surges, or natural disasters, or bad luck where you have a bad batch of drives. Who knows what the future may hold for your drives? You'll need to know how to deal with failed drives, including making sure you have a backup of all your important programs and data. If your drive starts to fail, you should attempt a backup. However, make sure that your backups don't overwrite or replace your current backups. You don't want to destroy, damage, or overwrite your current backups in case you may need them. In addition, your backup needs to be stored away from your computer that you're backing up, and don't perform a backup of files and place that backup on the same drive. Yes, that does happen. Don't be one of those people. Lastly, remember if your drive fails or starts to fail, it may already be too late to perform a backup. Back up often and have multiple copies of backups. So how much disk space do you need? For low usage where you just need a basic system to surf the internet, create some standard documents such as your resume, and to check your email, you should plan for purchasing a drive, a minimum 256 gigabytes to 1 terabyte for general use. This will allow you to store documents, some pictures, and some music. Since the price will not be much different between 500 gigabytes and 1 terabyte, you should consider purchasing 1 terabyte drives. Medium usage is aimed at media consumers or gamers, where you create lots of documents and storing lots of high-definition pictures and videos. I would recommend 1 to 2 terabytes as a minimum. For heavy usage where you're a content creator, developer, or IT professional, and you need to create lots of high-resolution content or have a large collection of files, I would recommend a minimum of 2 to 4 terabytes. However, you may consider using a separate external storage. For people who have large data sets, archives, or backups, you'll need a minimum of 4 terabytes. Since you may depend on having the data available, this is where external storage may come in handy, such as using a network-attached storage or NAS with RAID to provide fault tolerance. Of course, you should look at how much storage your current files take up now and how much content you'll be creating during the next few years before making your final decision. Here's a table showing much on what I showed in the previous slide. You should always use an SSD, preferably non-volatile memory for your OS and apps. Consider using external drives, NAS, or cloud storage for overflow. Consider partitioning your drive to separate OS and apps and personal files for better organization and backup. When a drive is no longer functioning, determine if any changes made to your system recently, and determine if changes could have affected the drives. If you added a device recently, is it causing an overload or a short? Look for any beeps, displayed errors, or logs in the operating system. Research those errors in relevant log entries. Determine if the drive is recognized in the BIOS setup program. For mechanical hard drives, listen for loud clicking, grinding, and scraping. If noise is coming from hard drive, these are the sounds of death for a mechanical hard drive. With newer drives, you may need to put your ear to the hard drive to see if it is running or if you hear any clicking, grinding, or scraping. Did lights flicker, or did you smell anything burning? If you hold a mechanical drive while it is on, can you feel the torque of the drive or feel that the drive is spinning? If it is not spinning, check power to the drive. Check for loose or damaged cables, including power and data, and make sure the drive is connected properly. If applicable, check power provided by power supply. Check for overheating. Does the case or drive feel warmer than usual? If so, let the system cool off and try again to verify an overheating problem. If applicable, suspect faulty drives, faulty data and power cables, faulty expansion card, and faulty motherboard. To isolate, swap each one by one. Alternatively, try the drive and related components in another system. You can also run hard drive diagnostics or built-in diagnostics. Some of the common diagnostic programs or test options available from the major vendors are shown on the screen. Check your vendor's website for available options. When a drive is not detected during OS installation, it is mostly the same steps that we discussed in the last slide of dealing with a failed drive. The only difference is, since you're trying to install an operating system such as on a new computer, you'll need to check to see if the driver is needed to be added to the operating system, particularly for special drives or RAID configuration. If you cannot boot from your bootable drive, including getting a no boot device found error message, perform the steps as you would for a failed drive. Verify drive is connected or plugged in properly. Open the BIOS setup program and check to see if the drive is being detected by the BIOS setup program. Check to see if the drive, device, or expansion slot is disabled. If no drive is detected, suspect a dead or disconnected drive. Check the UEFI versus legacy boot mode. Newer systems should be using UEFI, and older OS or drives with MBR might require legacy boot mode. Check for connected or loaded removable disks, including USB drives and optical disks that the system could be trying to boot from. If you get an operating system not found message, the system can't detect the drive. The boot partition is missing or corrupted, the boot order is incorrect, or the OS was deleted or corrupted. Check the following. Check physical drive connection. Check BIOS or UEFI settings, including if it's detected, boot order, and boot mode. If no drive is detected, suspect a dead or disconnected drive. Boot from installation or recovery media by using a USB bootable drive, such as Windows, Linux, or Mac OS recovery, to see if the OS is visible using available Windows tools or partitioning tools such as DiskPart. For Windows, run a startup repair, and for Linux, FSCK if available. For Windows, repair the bootloader by using recovery mode command prompt and using the bootrec and bcd boot commands as shown on the screen. Check disk health by using diagnostic tools such as S.M.A.R.T on Linux or manufacturing tools such as ctools or WD Dashboard or BIOS Diagnostic. If S.M.A.R.T shows bad sectors, reallocate errors or failures, replace the drive. Last resort, reinstall the OS if boot partition is missing or corrupted, OS files are unrepairable, or disk is fine but no OS is installed. Here are some common boot failure issues and how to fix them. If the BIOS doesn't see the drive, start with checking cables and connectors, reseating the cables and connectors, and replacing the drive. Wrong boot mode messages are always using the BIOS setup program and making sure you have the correct UEFI versus legacy boot mode selected for your system or drive. If you have a bootloader is corrupt, use bootrec and bcd boot tools to rebuild the bootloader. If your partition table is missing, you'll have to recreate partitions carefully or restore from backup. If the drive is failing, replace the drive and recover data if possible. If no OS is installed, make sure you're booting from the correct drive. If it still does not work, you may need to reinstall from bootable media. When you're encountering slow disk performance, try rebooting your computer. Check for malware. Look to see if the hard drive LED is constantly on, and check to see if your disk is full. Consider running a disk cleanup program such as Windows Disk Cleanup. Use Task Manager and Resource Monitor. Use Task Manager Performance tab to see usage of disk, including disk transfer rate, average response time, and read and write speeds. If they're high performance usage, use Processes tab to see which programs is using the disk the most. Use Resource Monitor to see disk queue length and disk input-output. See if the paging file is being used too much, which usually indicates if you need additional RAM. To check paging file, open Resource Monitor Memory tab and look at hard faults per second. Run Windows error checking or check disk for lost clusters. If it finds lots of errors, expect that your drive is failing or about to fail. If you have a mechanical hard drive, consider running Disk Defragmenter to defragment your disk. The table shows you some indicators showing that your drive is not fast enough for your needs, that you do not have enough memory so that your hard drive is being used as a substitute, or your hard drive is about to fail. These indicators will be shown on some of the next few slides. Task Manager is a utility program within an operating system that displays information about the processes and applications running on a computer. It allows users to monitor system performance, see what programs are consuming resources like CPU and memory, and terminate unresponsive programs. Task Manager Processes tab shows which applications are using the disk the most. If you click the disk header or top of the column, it will sort by that column. Task Manager Performance tab, this will show you the overall usage, average response time, and read and write speeds. It also shows you how hard your hard drive is working in active time and the disk transfer rate. Resource Monitor is a Windows utility that displays real-time information about how hardware and software resources are being used, including providing detailed insights into CPU, memory, disk, and network usage. Open Resmon from Start or Run. Go to the Disk tab. Look at the disk queue length, read-write, IOPS, and latency. Sustained queue length greater than 1 per active drive is a potential bottleneck. High average response time equals slow disk I/O. Hard drive at 200 IOPS are quite slow compared to SSDs at 1 million IOPS. Go to the Memory tab and look at hard faults per second. A high number of hard faults per second indicates that you don't have enough RAM and your system has to use page and file on your disk to make up for the low RAM. Disk fragmentation only affects hard drives, not solid-state drives. You create a file and save it to disk. New files are saved after you save that file. You open the file and you add to it so that the file is bigger than it was. The operating system cannot save the file back into the same spot that it came from on the disk. It saves what it can back in the original spot, and then the rest is saved in a different spot. After a length of time, the files are fragmented and spread throughout your drive. When you open a file that is spread out through the drive, it takes longer than it is if the parts were together. When you defragment your drive, you're restructuring your files and putting all the pieces back together. You should defrag your drive when 10% or higher fragmented. Since SSDs are not significantly affected with disk fragmentation, because electronically you can go directly to the memory cells where the file chunks are stored quickly, and defragmenting your SSDs will reduce the lifespan of your SSD. When you're experiencing corrupt drives and data, try rebooting your computer. Make sure drive and related cables and powers are connected properly. Suspect the drive is or has failed. Suspect malware. Suspect faulty cable, failed expansion card, or failed motherboard. You try to back up the data, make sure the backup does not overwrite previously backed up data. Restore from backup. If you don't have backups, you may be able to use a recovery service to recover disks, but expect it to be expensive with no guarantees. Self-monitoring, analysis, and reporting technology, also known as S.M.A.R.T, is a monitoring system for storage drives that gathers data on the health of the drive and reports it to the user. Each drive manufacturer has its own smart drive diagnostic tools. It looks for warning signs to avoid hardware failure. When warning signings appears, consider performing a backup and replacing the drive. S.M.A.R.T is useful for ensuring that your drive is performing at its peak. Schedule disk checks. Some of the errors that indicate imminent failures is reallocated sector count is high, bin retry, data downshift error count or runtime bad block count is high, reported uncorrectable errors, reallocation event, and soft read error rate or TA counter detected, which is the number of off-track errors. How to check S.M.A.R.T status. On Windows, use the following: Crystal Disk, which can be found at crystalmark.info. Or you can use the command prompt with wmic disk drive get status. Note, it only shows basic status like OK or pred failed. For Linux, install S.M.A.R.T MonTools. And for Apple, use the S.M.A.R.T utility. RAID troubleshooting was covered in the video on RAID, but to complete the CompTIA objective, I'm doing a quick overview of troubleshooting RAID issues. The RAID not found error message usually indicates a missing or faulty RAID controller. When RAID stops working, each RAID is different. Check the console and the documentation for the RAID before you start reconfiguring RAID and pulling drives. If an array is missing, it usually means that the system cannot detect one or more drives that are part of the RAID configuration, which is usually caused by drive failure, one or more disks in the RAID array may have failed, connection issues, where loose cables or faulty ports can prevent the system from recognizing the drive, RAID controller failure, where the hardware or software managing the RAID array might be malfunctioning, BIOS or firmware changes, where updates or resets can sometimes cause the RAID configuration to disappear, and accidental removal. If a drive was removed or replaced without proper RAID management, the RAID may not be recognized. When you find a failed drive, check the documentation for the RAID and how to replace the drive. If you tried to create a RAID in Windows, verify that RAID is not enabled on a RAID adapter or motherboard via the BIOS setup program. A power surge can corrupt a hardware configuration done through BIOS setup program. Remember, RAID is not a backup. RAID is for fault tolerance so that you keep you working with a failed drive. For example, if you're using disk mirroring and a file gets corrupted on one drive, it will get corrupted on the other drive. Question: what should be done regularly to protect your important data? Answer: backups. Question: you're not booting from your C drive. What are the two things you should check first? Answer: check the boot order in the BIOS setup program and see if any removable drives are connected, such as USB drives or optical disks. Also check for network boots if you're in an enterprise environment. Question: what can you use to give early warnings that a drive is about to fail? Answer: S.M.A.R.T. Question: you have issues with the hard drive that a file system check shows that the files are all accessible and the file system is clean. After the check, the PC still issues a hard drive error message. Which of the following is most likely the cause of the error? Answer: S.M.A.R.T failure. Question: multiple users contact the help desk to report issues with the network file shares. Files are accessible, but performance is very slow. Which of the following should you perform first? Answer: check the RAID drive status LEDs. Question. The user tries to turn on a computer but gets the following error message. Bootable device not found. The computer had no issues yesterday. Which of the following is most likely the reason for this error? Answer. The HDD is malfunctioning. Question. You have files that disappeared from a laptop. You discovered during the troubleshooting that the drive was corrupt due to a possible mechanical failure, but the files were still readable. Which of the following actions should you take during troubleshooting? Choose two answers. Answers. Check S.M.A.R.T information and run check disk. Question. You hear a distinct clicking sound after power is applied to the motherboard. Which of the following most likely be the cause? Answer. HDD. Note, power supply can cause clicking sounds, but that is not one of the available answers. For more information, check these sites shown on the screen. In summary, you should perform backups on a regular basis on all important data. If possible, if your drive starts to have problems, you should perform a backup. When a drive is no longer functioning, determine if any changes made to the system recently that could affect the drives. Look for any beeps, displayed errors, logs in the operating system, and research those errors and relevant log information, and determine if the drive is recognized in the BIOS setup program. For mechanical hard drives have loud clicking, grinding, or scraping are the sounds of death for a drive. When the drive is not recognized, check for loose or damaged cables, power or data, or make sure the drive is connected properly. If applicable, suspect faulty drive, faulty data and power cables, faulty expansion card, and faulty motherboard. Self-monitoring analysis and reporting technology, or S.M.A.R.T, is a monitoring system for storage drives that gather data on the health of the drive and reports it to the user. Thank you for watching this video. The next video will be Storage, Part 9, Legacy Drive Technology and Standards. If you like this video, be sure to click the like button. If you have not already, subscribe to the Pat Has Your Back channel. Thank you.